As a supermodel, actress, and health expert, I've traveled the world, and I have learned that no two people share the same story. My name's Carol Alt, and in my living room, you'll hear the stories that have shaped some of the most successful people in their industries. Welcome to Carol Alt's Living Room. A true artist, Ralph Rucci has taken the world of couture by storm, but it was quite a journey to get there. Hear all the gritty details on Carol Alt's Living Room. Hi, I'm Carol Alt. Welcome to Carol's Living Room, where we're interviewing fashion greats, old friends and new. So my newest best bud, Ralph Rucci. Ralph, I have to tell you, I'm very nervous about this interview. You are an incredibly complex person and an incredibly detailed designer. And as Patricia Mears, who is the deputy director of the FIT Museum, said, you have many facets, and we'd really like to do them justice.
Thank you.
That's what we're going to try to do in this
But don't be nervous. There's no reason to be nervous.
Thank you.
I'm one of the easiest persons, I think, in fashion to get along with.
Perhaps as a person, but I've watched you design.
That's
you
beyond
are
complex.
Beyond complex. So I have to admit, because I knew you were showing in Paris, I thought you were French.
Everybody thought I was European, based either in Paris or Italy. But indeed, it was not true. And it was, I was the only American ever invited in history to show at the Couture in Paris in 2001. And it was the most frightening step in my life. So every detail had to be redone 3 times. And the collection was presented really in homage to the essence of couture, with severity.
Balmain, I know, was a great influence on you.
And Balenciaga. That's my greatest influence. And the day after the show, the French embraced me incredibly. And that's how I knew it turned my life immediately, but that's how my entire reputation as a couturier started.
We will get to that.
Yeah.
I want to take you back to the very beginning. You were born in Philadelphia?
I was born in Philadelphia. I come from a very simple Italian family, a loving family. I have one sister, and my parents spoiled me with anything I wanted to do in the arts. So they encouraged your artistic side? They did. They wanted me to be a doctor, as all Italian, or a doctor, or a lawyer. You know, they want. But they saw that I had a proclivity to the arts, and my father, who's a very elegant man, he indulged it, and my mom, and I went to Jesuit prep schools, and I started off at a Jesuit university in college, but then I came up to New York and went to NYU, and I majored in philosophy and literature, but then fashion struck me. And I went back to Philadelphia, finished undergraduate, and am I rushing to?
No, I'm going through my cards really quickly. Just turn you on and let you talk.
I discovered while I was in college, when the bug bit,
that was your aha moment, was when you were in college?
I discovered an image, Carol.
Okay.
It's the photographer David Bailey photographed it for Nancy White, who was the editor-in-chief at Harper's Bazaar. And it was a woman on this side. It was from the back. It was a white gazar trapezoid bride, but it wasn't a bride. It was a very modern trapezoidal shape.
Okay.
And on this side was her attendant in black gazar. And I was hypnotized because I said art could be fashion, fashion could be art. They looked like Robert Motherwell's elegies to the Spanish Republic.
Right.
And they were made by this man I had never heard before. His name was Cristobal Balenciaga. And that I was in the stacks at the museum, and I said, that's it. This is where I'm going. And then I approached it as an academic, and I began to do research. And I discovered there was a man in New York who came from that school of Balenciaga, and his name was Halston. And then I did research. You remember him. You probably worked with him.
I didn't. He was a little bit before my time, but all my friends worked. Karen Alexander worked for him. There was a lot of my girlfriends, Pat Cleveland, all worked for
Karen
Halston.
Bjornson.
Karen Bjornson, yes, Karen Bjornson. He was a little bit before my time, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I started my research, and then fast forward. I made it my way up here, and I said, I'm going to work for Halston. That's the only person I want to work for. And it happened. I made it happen.
So your aha moment was kind of in college. You saw this photo from David Bailey, who is a brilliant photographer. I mean, he was one of the real greats up there with Penn and Avedon
Yes.
and whatnot. So I can understand being stricken by something like that. You went back, you finished your university, and then you came back. How did you meet Halston?
Good, really good question. Do you mind a little story?
Tell me, you're here for stories, baby.
Halston had something that no other American fashion designer had. He had his own made couture, and he never called it that. He liked to call it made-to-order department. And he had a salon, he had a boutique and salon on 68th and Madison Avenue. It was the chicest thing you've ever seen in your life. And on the first floor, Victor Hugo, his boyfriend, did mannequins dressed in knit cashmeres. And then on the second floor, they had ready-to-wear and evening clothes and Elsa Peretti jewelry. And on the third floor, they had a workroom. On the fourth floor was the couture department and Halston's office. So I have my one sister. I come up with this plan. I convince my sister, you are going to order something from the made-to-order department. This is 1973,
This
4.
is brilliant.
Isn't it great? It's true.
It's brilliant.
My sister said, you're out of your mind. I can't afford that.
it.
And I said, yes, you can. You work, you have a credit card, and we'll put it on your credit card because this is going to get a job interview for me, and it's going to launch my career. Trust me, in a number of years, the cost won't mean anything.
You were sure of this. You felt that.
Oh, yeah. So we do this. And it was an episode of the Lucy and Ethel show. We go in, this woman who is still in my life, Sassy Johnson, was the vendeuse in the couture department. And that's the season that Halston did bodysuits.
Oh, yes.
And my sister's body was a size twig then. And
Size twig.
we asked to see some bodysuits, and she could fit samples. So there was an ivory cashmere, backless halter bodysuit, and Halston showed it with a matching cashmere kimono in ivory. And anyway, she puts this on, there's no price tag.
Of course. If you have to ask, you can't afford it.
So when I'm sitting in the salon behind my sister, we're both looking into the mirrors, and she's motioning into the mirror, you're out of your mind. And I just said, yes, just say yes. So she comes out, and I said, what is the price of it? And she tells us, and I said, oh, we'll take it. So as she is doing all of this, they're altering and all of that, she's writing it up, and I said, Miss Johnson, I'd like to ask you a favor. Could you get me an interview with Halston?
So wait a minute, you bought the outfit first
Yes.
and then waited to ask?
Yes.
That was courage. Was your heart pounding?
Yes, but I was a kid. And
Right, you
so,
risk everything, yeah.
So she said, yes, when you come up to New York, we'll organize it. And I did. I moved up to New York. I started to take some classes at FIT, technical classes, and I had my interview with Halston. I was shaking when I met Halston. He was grand. He was the king. And they hired me for nothing, and I didn't care. You found a way to work, take the money and use it well. And that's how I started. And I worked in the workroom. I wasn't in the front,
Right.
saying this is...
No, you had to work your way forward.
Yeah, which is what I wanted. I wanted to drape and cut toiles and all of that. And then I was very impatient. And in 1981, I showed my first collection on my own.
Did you ever pay your sister back for the outfit?
Many times.
Many times over. Okay, that was the important thing because,
Yes,
you want to keep good family.
And she just donated it last year to the Philadelphia Museum of Art. It has withstood time because of the quality.
That's usually what all the greats do. They
Yeah.
withstand time.
Yeah.
Well, we've had kind of a parallel career in a sense that I started in '79, and by 1981, when you did your first show, I was just starting to rise.
Wow.
So I was so interested in trying to figure out how you made it from Philadelphia, studying philosophy, to FIT, and then to your first show. What made you jump from Halston to do your first show? That's a big step because you have this huge job with Halston.
No, it wasn't huge. I was in the
It's
workroom.
huge for you.
Yeah, it is.
Because
I'm
you
going to
know
be-
where you can go.
I'm going to be frank with you.
Tell me.
I worshipped Halston. I thought he was the most brilliant designer in the world.
But, I hear a but coming.
I couldn't withstand seeing what was going on.
Oh.
And
Well, explain that, what was going on at the time.
he moved into the Olympic Tower.
Right.
And when that happened, the man's point of view of himself changed. And when you lose your humility, you lose everything. And the other thing, that the people who came very close to him, no one had a future. Everyone burnt out except for a handful.
Right.
Like,
And then they
you
did
know,
the
I'm
wrong
looking at
advice,
you,
too.
and I'll tell you who comes to my mind. Immediately, he got away with his own life, and I know you know him, Tony Spinelli.
Yeah.
We love Tony.
Yeah,
And Karen
wow.
Bjornson did, because she had a life. She married.
She's a very level-headed girl.
Yeah. But, I mean, look at Bill Dugan, his first assistant passed away, Nancy, anybody that came through the whole Warhol crowd there, and Dee Dee Ryan. And so I wanted to hold him in my mind's eye the way I always felt.
Right.
And plus I was impatient. So I called an aunt of mine whom I adored, and she lent me only $10,000, and I put my collection together.
With
In
10,000
But then 10,000 was a lot then. I made the entire collection with fitting on live models. And do you remember Zoli?
I remember Zoli.
Of course you remember Zoli.
Zoli was an agency that represented what we called unique girls.
Yes.
Ethnic and...
Yes.
Yes.
Zoli came to my teeny one studio, one room apartment and saw the clothes and said you could have all the girls for free.
How great.
Kathy Shofi, Kathy Timmer, Sean Ellers.
Well, you have to understand, though, back in that time, shows were done mostly in ateliers. I wondered why you had showed at the Westbury Hotel. It was
Oh, you
because your
remember?
atelier was very small.
It was very small.
You didn't have room for that, because that's the shows, by the time the 90s rolled around, became extremely grand. I mean, they
Yes.
were beyond productions. But back in the day, you know, they had fit models, and we had what we called 7th Avenue workhorses
Yes.
that you fit on, and they showed. It wasn't, you know, girls like me or girls who were in the magazines. In fact, I remember the first show I did, I only did because my agency said I was overexposed.
Oh, you had to do a show?
Well, she wanted me to stop working. I'm like, what am I going to do? So she said, well, maybe you could do a show, walk a show, because there were no photographers there.
Whoa.
It was just editors who came, buyers who came. It wasn't, I remember the first time a celebrity came to a show was in Rome at Valentino, and it was Chris Reeves, because he was shooting a movie there. So he came to
And
the show.
what was the show that you did that you just spoke of?
Which one?
The one you said.
Oh, the very first one, it was Calvin Klein and Ralph Lauren were both showing in the same day. He said, well, maybe we'll call Calvin and we'll call Ralph and see if they'll take you. Would you walk for $700? Which was like, you know, it was not great, but it was better than what the magazines paid, which, you know, was like $200. So I could see Zoli coming in and saying, we love your stuff, give you the girls, and you showed at the Westbury Hotel.
Yeah.
Tell us what the experience was like.
Oh boy.
I mean, it's
So,
your first show. You must have been
First
shaking
show.
in your boots.
And no staff. And
No staff.
I have to tell you about this. I had my sister who was helping me for my entire life. And there was a young lady that I met at FIT. Her name is Vivian Van Atta. She remained with me for 30 years.
Wow.
And it's one of those stories, behind every man is the greater woman. And Viv really gave me the space to become what I became.
To create.
And I was working day and night. And the last couple of pieces were fluted jerseys like Madame Grey. And I was awake, I couldn't see. But I wheeled the racks from 71st Street to 69th and Madison myself. And it's a true story. It's cliche, but one of those true
I
stories.
believe it.
Because
you
don't
had
have
to
money.
do everything yourself.
You have to. You don't have money for a trucking company. So, and then I remember, if I can connect back with those emotions, it was horrifying, but very quiet. That's the way I must always show. I have to be prepared. So when I'm sending the collection out, there has to be a meditative state that exactly. A fil de plume of self.
Yes.
And it was made to order. It was not for the stores,
Right,
ready to
right,
wear. And
Just to explain that made to order means that each time a woman sees a sample piece, she
Right.
orders it, you fit her,
Yeah.
and it's made to her body for her.
yes, that's
So you have
couture.
one sample, and that's
Yes,
it.
yes. And you don't sell the same look to two individuals in the same state. You just don't.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Or in the same color, or you change something.
No, if
No,
they're paying
just-
couture,
You just,
they can't. It's just not right. Especially now. They get in trouble in Paris when they do that. But and we never
and
did.
they should, because the prices for couture are really up there. And they pay,
Insane.
and they pay for uniqueness.
Yeah. So that's how I started at the Westbury, and that was 1981.
What was the response to your show, and who were you showing to?
Yeah. We had very little press there because we couldn't get them in. We got our hands on an invitation list of the organization called the Musicians Emergency Fund. This was an organization run by Mrs. Austin Hurst. And all of the ladies would go there, and every year, for either a black tie dinner or a lunch, they would bring Madame Gray in from Paris. And the guest list included Mrs. Onassis and Mrs. Erdogan and just Rayner and Kempner and all the
Your
American-
target audience.
Right. And this is the list that we got. So we invited all of these ladies. 2 showed up. We had very little press.
All you need is 2 because they spread the word.
Yeah. It didn't happen that easily.
Okay.
I had a very rough start.
Really?
I couldn't get Women's Wear Daily in to review the collection. They finally, after weeks, they asked if I would bring the collection down to 10th Street when they had the offices
Did
there.
you wheel it down?
Did. Took taxis, big taxis.
Right.
And they didn't do anything about it.
Oh.
There was a number of years, I was taken very unseriously because I was so serious about the product.
You were taken unseriously because you were so serious?
Yeah.
So that leads to a question. What was the fashion industry like in that moment that you, being a serious fashion couturier, wouldn't be taken seriously? Do you remember? Can you go back to that moment?
Yeah. There seems to be, you had to be part of the collective consciousness of fashion editors. Grace was running Vogue.
Right, Grace Mirabella.
I forgot who ran Harper's Bazaar before Elizabeth.
Before Liz, it was, anyway.
Yeah. And
yeah.
women's wear was Mr. Fairchild, who watched me for many years, and then he was the one who told me.
Oh, it was Fairchild.
Mr. Fairchild, and Michael Cody was there, and Etta Florio. They were the powerhouses at W and Fairchild Publications. And I was not received until I began showing ready to wear formally in the 90s. So there was a number of years, because Carol, from 1981, when we showed the collection, to 1986, they were very difficult years, staying alive, selling little bits and pieces here and there. Very difficult years. And then 86, I took a showroom on 7th Avenue, small, and I showed a very, very strong collection, and I was covered by Women's Wear Daily. And
Finally.
yeah, and I was selling stores. And then what happened was we had that huge economic crash in October of 87.
87,
that
Monday, Black Monday.
Remember?
I do. I was
have
on the set of
chills
a movie
thinking
in,
about
in
it.
Europe.
Saks Fifth Avenue came in. For years I didn't say their name, but Saks came in and they canceled a huge order that was in production. And I had to close. I didn't declare bankruptcy. I just had to leave my office on 7th Avenue. We moved back into my apartment, which was insane. It became the first time of many. And Viv moved in with me, and we worked and did the best that we could out of my apartment. And it wasn't until all of these years, Viv moved to LA, and I was doing individual made-to-order pieces and then designing freelance as a ghost for different people. And it wasn't until 1994 that I came back with a label called Chado.
All right, before we get to Chado, you remember in the day, Halston had sold his name. And he started not doing his version of couture. He started to do a lower end line, and people thought he was crazy.
Yeah, sorry.
But you had him, you had Ralph Lauren, you had Calvin Klein was licensing out all over the place. So what you were doing was completely against the grain of what everybody else was doing. Everybody else was trying to go mass,
Yeah.
and you were going couture. Do you think that had any influence on how difficult it was for you to keep the line?
Yeah. They were very difficult years, Carol. And if truth be told, deep, deep depression, getting involved in drugs, just to burn the hurt
Right.
away.
Yeah, I mean, because
And-
you're an artist and nobody's appreciating the art that you're creating.
And staying alive, not knowing how you're going to pay rent or live. And so I become stronger every time I'm faced with a problem. And I must also tell you, in the midst of all this, I'm a very religious man and spiritual.
I am too. I love that.
Because I'm a swatch of what God can do if you believe and you ask for help. And so I would remain faithful and I would pursue what I knew I had to. If He gave me this talent, then there's no reason why it cannot continue.
That you had to have faith that it was going to.
To this day, here's an example.
Okay.
It hurt me very much personally until I finally said, it doesn't matter. I have never been covered in American Vogue, while the editor-in-chief, who is there now, has had the position. I was in when Grace was there.
Me too.
Right.
Me too.
So it makes us realize our profession is not about what others think. If we are kind and genuine and we work hard, we will arrive at the space we were destined to be at.
In God's good time.
That's it.
In God's good time. What is your connection to James Baldwin?
Wow. Well, first of all, I don't want to relate myself to him. He's one of the most brilliant American authors. I think James Baldwin, Truman Capote, and Tennessee Williams are probably the greatest. And I would say, modern thinkers, Gore Vidal, even though they all hated each other.
Don't all great people hate each other, it seems.
But Baldwin had to leave the United States to become an author and move to France because he was a black man.
To be recognized.
To be recognized. His voice was so sensitive and brilliant, but it couldn't be received in the United States for the simple reason that he was an African American.
Crazy, right?
Well, and look, we're back in that same space today in 2018 because
And how did we go around
because
and
we put
degenerate
somebody
again?
insane in the office.
Yeah, totally nuts. So that's your connection. You both had to leave the States. So you now launch your next line, which became Chado.
Chado.
Talk about your connection to tea.
Yes, I did it symbolically because in all of those years, all of these designers are coming out with collections that looked very empty to me. So I don't want my name on the label. And we come up with the word Chado, Viv and I did. Chado is the 15th century Japanese ceremony, as you well know, of offering you a cup of tea. And there are 331 steps to it. And the symbolism of the formality and at the same time its conclusion being something so simple as a cup of tea, I wanted to relate to what I was doing, the product, the branding of the name, and so on and so forth. And it worked. People then, of course, began calling me Mr. Chado.
Mr. Chado.
For years. And it remained on the label. And, Carol, I had my head down, working night and day, 16-hour days, 7 days a week, for many, many years. But it happened so rapidly. In '94, we took the little penthouse studio at 550 7th Avenue, the building.
550, yeah, that's a
You know,
nice
everybody
building.
was in that building.
Yes.
Ralph Lauren,
Yes, that was a good
Blas,
building.
Bean, Donna, Bailiff. And it was the teeny box of we could fit it in your home. And then we moved into 2 floors next door to the building, and I brought my production department on 1 floor. Then we took 17,000 square feet in Soho. And
When Soho was cheaper. Now
no, it
Soho's
was so expensive.
it's even more expensive now.
Yeah, it was
Have you seen
crazy.
the prices down here?
Yeah. And Michael Gabellini did the office down there, and he's extraordinary. And so from 91 to 2000, the business boomed. And as Bert Tansky, who was the CEO, would say, because of what product you're offering, you are bringing the billionaires into Neiman Marcus. So I had an exclusive relationship with Neiman Marcus.
Oh,
And
finally recognized.
Yeah, and I didn't have to go
Right.
anywhere.
Right.
I didn't have to seek any other stores. I mean, we did have, but not in America. They had an exclusive. And we would do trunk shows. And,
Oh, you did trunk shows.
oh gosh, in the early days, I did them all myself.
Because I was wondering how you raised the money to do Chatto.
Yeah.
You were doing it through your trunk show. So you were
Yeah.
just doing one line of samples.
Yes.
So just to explain what a trunk show is, taking your samples around to different Neiman Marcuses in different cities,
Yes.
fitting the women as they came in at an event that Neiman Marcus would throw for
Yes.
you. You'd fit the women, they'd make the orders, and then you'd fit the outfit exactly to them, make it, and ship it to them.
Yeah. And also, Neiman's was also buying stock for all the stores. So I was doing made to order and ready to wear.
And
the
Neiman Marcus at that point was really, really, really high end.
Very high.
They were very high end and very exclusive. It's a little bit different than it is today,
Yeah.
which is why I could see it would be a perfect fit for you. So go ahead.
And we had a great relationship.
Right.
They were family. And I didn't have to wait to be paid.
That's always
it's
a big
amazing.
thing. Yeah, well, you have to do you have to do the next
Yeah.
season, and you need to have that money
And we
available.
were doing insane business. So when
That's
I
awesome.
started to show in Paris, I didn't seek investors.
So you actually were invited to Paris in 2002.
No,
Was it?
we were invited in 2000.
2000.
So, And then it took me that amount of time. So we showed in 2001 for fall 2002. It was July.
That's why I knew it was 2002.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think there were 60 looks. It was an incredible collection. And but the point to conclude the past is that I paid for all of that. We had built that up to
the
many
point where
millions
you
of
could-
dollars.
Wow.
And so I never sought investors.
Did your sister have anything to
Oh,
do with
yes.
it? Yes.
Rosina was living in Rome, and
Okay.
she was raising her son. But then Luca came of age to come back to the States. She wanted him educated here. And Rosina came, and she began working for me.
Okay.
But Vivian and I handled the business alone.
Okay.
And we didn't have computers in those days.
No,
So I did everything by hand,
hand.
all checks and all of that. And late at night,
Well,
I
and the
would-
ledgers and all the numbers and all the
Everything.
women that you have to keep all their sizes so that
Yes.
every time you redo an outfit for them,
Yes.
they could just call you and say, I want that outfit, and you'd fit it for them.
Yes.
That's a lot of upkeep, and that's why I always assumed that there was always a business and a creative, but you actually did both.
Oh, Rosina began working for me, and I think what I was concluding with was that I did that on our own. I showed couture in Paris for 5 seasons, starting in 2002. I wish I would have had a CEO or a business partner, a
Well,
business manager to help
Would have
me.
taken the pressure off.
I do wish, but I never allowed myself to trust another person. I did trust Vivian 1,000%, and it was difficult for me to even find one.
Right.
So what happened when I began to start to show couture in Paris, the European market, the ladies who go to couture began to become aware, and they began to order. I was in shock after the first show. That day,
Good shock, I hope.
good shock. When I came out, I realized, sometimes you're at singular moments in your life and you feel it.
Yes.
This is a turn in my life, and I'll remember it for the rest of my life, because it was a who's who in the audience of press and individuals.
Which you couldn't muster in America.
Right.
Here you were being recognized and received in Paris.
And
As an American, which was
as an American,
very important.
As an American. I mean, suddenly the Ritz said, stay here for free. We want the American here.
I know, the Europeans are great like that, aren't
Yeah.
they?
And so the next morning, that night, dear friends who came in, so many friends came to Paris, but there was a dinner and so on. And the next morning, we took the Louis XV salon on the first floor of the Ritz, the ballroom,
Right.
as our salon. So we could see clients during the week that were in for fittings.
Right, basically it was a trunk show in the
Yeah.
Ritz.
So Viv called and she said, get down here immediately. She had two women who you would know if I told you their names. She said, they're running around in their pantyhose and you have to get down here, we're selling clothes.
Sell them some clothes, quick.
And so we did. We became profitable from the first collection. And I showed in Paris for 5 seasons. And what happened was the ready-to-wear became even more successful because of the flow.
Of the couture.
The couture.
Of course. So it's weird because you are ready to wear, financed your couture, which then pushed your ready to wear.
Yeah.
And so you were invited to Paris because basically you were the only American couturier that I could think of in that moment who was literally doing hand sewing of beads, fluting, things that basically American designers weren't doing because they were opting for the much easier, quicker, ready-to-wear lines than the couture.
They couldn't because of the price point.
Price point was expensive, of course. So you're now in Paris. What was it like to jump from, because you have your team in New York, now you're in Paris.
Oh
was
no,
that
I would
harder
bring them.
or easier?
I would bring 20 people with me to Paris.
But I believe your sewers were actually in Paris. Weren't they sewing things in Paris and sending them back to America? So it became a little bit easier for you,
Oh
actually.
yes. What would happen? We would make.
It sounds like everything just meshed perfectly.
It did. It was meant. We would make 90% of the collection before we left the United States.
Right.
And all the furs. And there would be left over embroideries at Lesage or Le Merrier feathered work or Vermont or the different houses. And we would get them in Paris. And I would be in Paris for 1 week of fittings before the show. So my directress of the workroom, Anna Rita, she and I would go down. You've been to the Ritz gym before
Yes.
they remodeled. Remember how they had that Egyptian room
Yes.
for cardio?
It was weird, right?
It was weird. We used to go to the Ritz gym floor and cut out patterns because we couldn't cut them out on the carpet. It's true. And,
Right, you didn't want to cut up the carpet,
and
right? in the
Gianni
Ritz?
Versace was in the back salon. We were in the front, and his people were doing the same thing. We would all use the Ritz gym to cut last-minute things. So I would bring about 20 people in staff, and we would set up the sewing machines in the Louis XV salon at the Ritz, and that's where we would finish the clothes or make the alterations during the fittings.
You said something I thought was really sweet. You said you love what hands can do.
Yeah.
Everything you do is literally handmade. That's why couturiers, the couturier who does couturier is so expensive, first of all, but also so specific. You are a very detailed designer. It was said of you that sometimes you obsess and do things that have already been done, you do it 3 and 4 times over. Do you think you're obsessed, or do you think you're a perfectionist? Why do you think you do that?
Well, I'd like to speak of couture
Yes.
because at my age, I'm very comfortable with finding that this is my métier. This is my soul
Yes.
and my work. And I think this is what I do best. I don't have that talent of knowing what most people in the world want to look like or should look like. Recently, I posted something on Instagram that created so much havoc, and I'm not regretful. I saw this picture of a sneaker, and it had all sorts of platforms on it and wedges, and so the foot sat here and the sneaker was down there, and it had emblazoned on the shoe Balenciaga. And I said, that's it. You cannot use this name and put it on that monster when this name is known for this.
Couture, yeah, it's known for beauty.
So anyway, that's the kind of symbolic thing in reverse I have in my own mind. Couture is the marriage between an individual, her particular personality, and the discretion she's going for. A woman who can purchase couture does not want to be noticed. She wants it to be unto herself perfect, the greatest fabric, the greatest workmanship, and it has to be a second thought. She has to emerge first. And luckily, those are the type of clients I've always collected. Sometimes the press have said they're older looking. They're not. They're for you, they're for everybody. A couture garment, and I want to explain the process. You come in, either you see a sample that you say, can we take that and make it a coat? It could be a dress. Or you say, Ralph, I want a new pea coat and some fabulous new pants. And I make sketches according to what you would desire, show you different fabrics, you make a selection, we take full set of measurements, and then we make a toile. A toile is the cloth sample of the garment, and you're fit in that. And the cloth, the toile, is going to be most near the fabric you selected for the actual garment.
Right.
We make the corrections, we make a pattern from that after the corrections, we then cut it. It's all hand basted. It's also thread traced. So you have a basted fitting. So we have to see is the balance adjusted? Is it double face cashmere? Should we bring the shoulder in? The trousers, which are a difficult thing to fit, but I always love to fit a trouser to make a woman look so sexy. You have to, and everyone can. And I also cut clothes in a maniacal way. There are never straight side seams. Everything has to be a new way of doing it, you know? So
I'm bringing this question back again because you're going to have to explain this.
And then once the garments are finished, they're all made by hand. And once their garments are finished, a client then fits them in its final conclusion, and then she takes them. And often we cover the hangers in the same fabric as the garment,
right, so
which I love that.
Yeah, no, it's a great idea because
Now,
otherwise it leaves marks on the fabric.
I would like to also mention, I think it's important, if a woman goes to Paris and she goes to Chanel or she goes to Dior for couture, the prices are 6 figures. I am in no way, and I'm using your television program as an outlet, I'm in no way that expensive.
So you do couture for less.
Oh, much, much less.
Good, that's a good thing to know, ladies.
It's a good thing to know because I don't want people to get frightened because sometimes they get frightened. They hear it and it's true.
Yeah, they hear couture and
a
they
suit at Chanel is $100,000.
Yeah, I can't afford that. So it's funny because I had this question about how do you bridge your eccentricity with glamour in your designs, and you just touched on it. So can you answer that? How do you mesh that? Because eccentricity, it can be, like you said, maniacal.
Yeah. All right. Let's say you are going to a very special event. Carol Alt, let's put her in a red spaghetti strapped halter-ish slip. Nothing could be more defeating to allow you to breathe your personality and natural sensuality. I would put something black and asymmetric on you to make it beguiling. Draped jersey, something
eye-catching, but not overpowering.
Eye-catching, and half of your body is exposed, but it's not dead ringer on cleavage and that sort of thing. Or some sort of tent in black taffeta, and then when you turn around, your whole back is open. You have to...
Some little touch of sexiness.
You have to think.
In the middle of everything.
I don't sit down and sketch until I put a lot of thought into it. And I have to move when I'm thinking. So I have to be doing something, I have to be working out or walking or doing something.
Well, it was said that actually after you were showing in New York and you moved to Paris that you actually became lighter.
Such a good point, Carol. Thank you for saying that. My dear friend and journalist whom I love from the New York Times when she was at the Times, she left the Times, Kathy Horn, came to the first...
I knew Kathy.
Yeah, she's great. And she, a great supporter, and she reviewed almost every collection I've ever shown, ready to wear and couture. After the first couture, Kathy was in the audience, and she came to the dinner that night, and I said, "What did you think?" And she said, "You'll see it in the Times tomorrow." And right. And I saw, and she said in the Times, she said, it was about, the collection was so heavy and serious, it was about as easy as a summer's day in a church. And she said he has to open the windows and let the fresh air in of lightness.
Oh.
And I was so angry with her.
Yeah.
And I didn't speak to her for a couple of weeks. And then I called her and I said, "You know what? Let's
You're
have
right.
dinner." You're right. Because my hands did not let go of how to make this velvet, how to make that sable with this leather, how to do this. And when I began showing in the couture, one of the great honors that I had was Hubert de Givenchy would come as a guest, and he and Philippe Venet, his partner, and I became friendly with them. And it was Hubert who explained to me, they must look like hands never touched them and feel like that. Couture has to have weightlessness to it.
It must be lighter.
It must be lighter. And so over the years, I've learned that, how to do that.
Because that's actually a discipline.
It is a discipline. How to do that, even if you are making a structured garment. But Kathy put me on the path of correcting me.
So sometimes the truth hurts, but it can change everything
Yes.
for you.
Yes.
You took 3 years off after Paris. Why?
Oh, yeah. Well, two things, Karen. It was 2008,
Right?
and we had a huge economic collapse again,
Right.
and the Madoff thing happened.
Right. That was the housing issue in 2008.
And
Subprime.
Vivian said to me, I was busy working and doing, and she said, "I just want you to have a perspective, to put the lights over the runway here in Paris. This season, it's costing 80,000 euros. Last season, it was 25,000 euros. Everything had quadrupled. And also, we didn't go back that particular season because 3 days before Christmas, my mom died.
Oh, I'm sorry.
4 days before Christmas, the premier's mother died. And 5 days before Christmas, another mom died of the team. So none of us can really get our heads
Focus.
together.
Couldn't focus.
And then I stopped showing couture. That was the reason. And then as we moved on, you couldn't get out of this economic chain because everybody, Bergdorf's, Saks, everybody stopped buying. And Neiman's cut their orders back significantly. And individual women said, "We can't buy couture because our husbands have said we have to cut back."
The wallet is closed.
Closed. So it was very hurtful. And what happened was,
Yeah, because you're here, you're building this great line and working so hard to do it, and then all of a sudden, an economic downturn, and your main source of income were the women
Yeah.
who now were hit the hardest by that economic downturn.
yeah. And so I never let go any of my employees, and I had a huge staff at
Good
this
for
point,
you.
including my workroom, my production workroom. So we had a total of 67 employees.
Wow.
And so what I was lucky enough to have, while I was growing and building the business and so on, I bought art. And I had some really important pieces.
What kind?
Francis
Contemporary?
Bacon
Oh,
and
okay.
Cy Twombly. And I sold it all. And I was able to keep the business and the salaries going because I sold all of my art. I stayed afloat, very difficult. And then in 2010, I brought in partners.
Oh, you finally did. Wow.
Finally did. They were existing clients.
Now, is this still Chatto?
No, I had already changed the
When-
name to Ralph Rucci.
Okay. When did you sell that?
Oh, I never saw. This is what it was. Chatto went to Chatto Ralph Rucci,
Rucci.
and then it went to Ralph
Ralph
Rucci.
Rucci.
And then, while it was the business as Ralph Rucci in 2010, I brought in partners and sold my name. It became an intolerable situation, and they were pulling the essence of what the label Ralph Rucci meant out of Ralph Rucci, and they were not taking me seriously. So
Well,
I
they were
had
probably
to leave.
businessmen, right? And everybody has a different take when it comes to money as opposed to creativity.
And so I left. and it was the most difficult, decision in my life. And I'm still, I think, in shock by it. I miss my team. Don't forget, this is a business I spent 3.5 decades building, and my team is genius. Kathy Horn said this was the greatest workroom in the United States. But I hope someday I can get my archives back, because that's what I want most of all.
You lost your archives.
Yeah.
And do they do anything with your archives, or are they just sitting
I'm
there?
hoping they're not sold, but we have close eye on them.
Okay, okay. You, like Phantom Thread, you said you sew messages into your clothes.
Or I sometimes write in the prints script of messages on the clothes. I have done for years.
But you were actually first an artist.
Yeah.
I heard that you used to draw everywhere and leave drawings everywhere when you were a kid, and then, of course, that is a great help when you're designing clothes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I never considered myself a fine artist. You'll love this. I never considered myself a fine artist. But when I was young and I was taking some freelance jobs, just to stay alive, you had to come up with a system of sketching. If a commercial manufacturer on Broadway said, I want to see 80, 100 designs tomorrow, you had to go home that night and sketch 100 things. So I came up with a system of how to sketch quickly, and I think that came from being an artist. I don't want to say artist, but the artist part is already connected in your brain, before you're even conscious of it. And so, do you remember Tatiana Sirocco, the model?
No, I don't believe I do.
I guess you wouldn't, because she primarily worked in Europe, in Paris.
Okay.
Tatiana, when she retired, she married Serge Sirocco. Serge is an art dealer. They're based in San Francisco. And Serge, they're close friends. So Serge came to me and said that they were in town for something. He said, okay, we're doing an art show around your work. It's going to be May 2005, and that's it. And I was in shock. And this is like, I don't know, December. So I had to prepare for the show. Invitations were sent out and the whole bit. We shipped everything to San Francisco. And in 2005, that was my first one-man show. I've had 4 of them in total since then. And I love the fine art aspect, because I'm able to think without purpose. I think with one idea in mind, my unconscious, and executing the unconscious on a canvas.
Right.
I don't have to think about a design which has to be sold and work on an individual.
At the same time, you also put your artwork on your textiles.
Yeah, love that.
So you were creating your own textiles as well.
Yes. That's also part of what clients request. For example, I have a client, she recently said, the last silk raincoat that you made for me, which was screened with something, it's worn out. Could you do a new one? So I made a couple of paintings for her. She chose the painting. I screened on silk Grotto laundry, which is a file that's for raincoat. We screened it in Como. The cloth comes back, and we cut and make the raincoat. And she gets the present as the canvas. So it's like uber couture, because you get a painting.
Yeah, you get it's a lot of work, a lot of work. You say you listen to the fabric and you manipulate.
Carol, a design will tell you what it wants to be cut in. It's a really quite marvelous sensation.
Have you ever made a mistake? Have you ever thought somebody was
have.
saying something and then you put it on a woman and you go, oh, good grief, what did I do?
Of course I have.
Really?
Oh yeah, I'm sure I have.
Were you able to save them?
If you make the toile and then you make the garment, and let's say you have 3 fittings and it's just not 100%, start over. Yeah.
Just toss it.
Yeah, you're not hitting the nail. You're pushing it.
Yeah, I guess you're not really married to anything until you put that last stitch, right?
Yeah, it has to be, when it's correct. And I can't let anything out of my hands unless I know it's perfect.
That I know about you. That I know about you. So it seems to me that the overall theme of your entire career could be summed up in this. It's not just fashion, it's art.
Or
Because
God is in the details.
everything you do is artwork.
Thank you,
Every piece is artwork, right down to the details.
I think. Thank you.
No, it just seems to me that your whole being screams artistic.
And do you know what, Carol? There are only perhaps 4 mills in the world that make the kind of fabrics that I can offer. 4. That's what we're down to. And 2 are in Como.
The Italians, they love their
Oh, yeah.
textiles.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. James Galanos once said
Jimmy.
that. Huh?
Did you know Jimmy?
I didn't know Jimmy personally, no, but I mean, of course, I know his designs. But he once said that his whole career has come down to following Ralph Rucci.
He was a good buddy. He would come to Paris all the time. And one night I was doing fittings. It was one of those white nights in Paris when they were all in the streets screaming.
Yes, yeah.
And we were going and fit. Remember, those were the days that we were able to fit all night long.
Right.
Now, tonight I hear that you have to stop at midnight or something. So he was tired, and I'm fitting, and it's, I don't know, 2 o'clock in the morning. And someone, motioned me. Jimmy sat down on the corner, and he started to sketch. And it was sort of a historic moment, and he was sketching one of my designs. And I said, somebody get a picture of this.
Yeah,
Which we
right.
did.
That's awesome.
He was a great man, friend, and influence, of course, and advisor. Yeah.
I'm glad. Everybody deserves a friendship like that.
Yeah.
You don't work with stylists.
No, I always feel that they impinge upon the last piece. Well, I'll talk about 2 things.
Okay.
A stylist that would put your show together, I'm addressing right now, they would impinge upon the last conclusion that you have to arrive at on the collection, which means when I'm doing the looks and I'm organizing the lineup for a show, I've made all of the clothes. Now I have to put the story together, and it can only come from my heart. If I brought a stylist in, it would be a diffusion.
Yes, of course.
And I know how fashionable it is for years to have a stylist, and how the magazines are connected to the stylist, so that if you use somebody from Vogue, you're assured getting the clothes into Vogue. And this is one of the things.
Terrible, though, because it really doesn't let people like you have a chance
Well,
when
and
you
this-
really deserve a chance.
This was held against me for a long time, and so be it.
Yeah.
And then in terms of a stylist who represents a celebrity, my sister always took care of those people, and I always did lend clothes to people, especially the young ladies.
Okay, because it's been said that you
Yes.
that you did it.
I don't.
was quite surprised. I thought, did this hurt you at all? Because
It hurt
yeah.
a lot. We would do it when there was a reciprocation of, I think, sensibility. But if someone would call up and say, I'm the stylist for X, and can you send these clothes to this hotel in Los Angeles? And I would tell my office, I don't want the clothes to be on a rack all jam-packed with that stylist.
Damaged and dirty.
Forget
and
it.
Yeah, because people don't take care
If they come
of
to me
things.
and they want to be dressed, and it's interesting because then the other thing, I'll be really frank with you, I would say, she's up to getting $15 million for a picture. If she can't buy a dress,
Right? Thank you.
this is
Hello?
my business.
Of course.
And then
This is
some
how
of
I
the
make
most
my living.
some of the most divine women that I have dressed, we just suggested, may I make this for you, because there's a personal affinity.
Well, and it's also been said by a lot of women who wear your clothes that your clothes were meant for strong, confident women that wear clothes so the clothes don't wear them. But after talking with you, it seems to me that your actual goal is to dress women so that the clothes melts into who they are.
Exactly.
So it's kind of funny that there's this dichotomy where the women feel they need to be strong, confident women to wear your clothes, yet you feel you're building the clothes around the woman.
Yes, yes.
Why is there this discrepancy?
Well,
Maybe it's just that really strong, confident women love your clothes.
yes, I think there's been some negative publicity about me saying no, of dressing people. And interpretation of how I work hasn't been said as thoughtfully as you just put it.
Oh, well, thank you.
So it's that simple.
You then, so let's continue on your timeline because now that I've gotten your aesthetic, so you sold Ralph Rucci,
Yes.
your name,
Yes.
and then you walked away from the line, leaving this miraculous team that you had put together over decades, which was a real heartbreak. You then just opened up a new line.
Yeah, 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
What's it called?
It's RR331. That's the label.
Right, Ralph Rucci.
Ralph
And
Rucci,
331, like Chado. It's
Exactly.
kind of a
And the
takeoff.
name of the company is RR331 LLC, but the label is RR331. And I'm doing two things.
Okay.
I'm doing made-to-order clothes for individuals, men and women, and I'm doing some,
Wait, don't skip over that. You're doing men.
yeah, but on a couture level.
Wow.
Like, if years ago, I'll give you an example. Years ago, my girls in the workroom made me the most hot black matte alligator jacket, a little motorcycle
Right.
jacket. And men have seen it and said, I want one.
So
and
you were pushed into doing men,
Pushed into-
kicking and screaming.
No, it's fine. If they want a great cashmere
Yeah.
coat, we'll make it and whatever. And I'm doing a small group of ready-to-wear for Bergdorf Goodman only.
Okay.
And taking baby steps with that, we'll see where that leads. Because I'm not in the position to get into ready-to-wear on a large scale right now.
Why is that? Why do you
And the
think?
cost
The
involved.
cost involved.
You know, with couture, it's manageable, the profit structure is correct, and
Or maybe it's just what you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a separate little workroom run by a genius. His name is Nicolas Cato. He's a French man trained in the couture in Paris, downtown in the garment center. And hopefully by this fall, I'm going to open a small salon uptown.
Tell me about black holes.
Wow. Beautiful question. I've been fascinated by them for my entire life. And it wasn't until we had that genius or that
Tyson?
alien like Einstein, Stephen Hawking,
Stephen Hawkins.
who came here and explained to us that a black hole in diameter is larger than a planet, and everything is sucked into it. And what is on, we don't know what's on the other side of a black hole, but there could be galaxies. I like to think about, because he suggested, that on the other side of a black hole is the awareness that we seek. And it must be related to what we know and feel about God, since it is in an understandable solar system that's conceived by God. So for me, a black hole is very symbolic as a spiritual entity.
On a less esoteric level, it also sucks everything into your, you know, when you're doing your line, it sucks everything in.
Right.
It literally takes over your life. So I
Yes.
can now see your connection. I was wondering why you connected black holes, like what this connection you felt spiritually. But when I think you're giving everything that you have to every show that you're doing, every season, it literally is all consuming.
It is. And I can't be social when I'm making a collection.
I can't be social when I'm shooting a movie. I
Right?
can't do it.
I have to.
I
I'm up in the
understand.
morning. I have to go to the gym, go
you
to my
are
office.
single focused.
Go home. I can't go out to dinner. I don't like to talk to people. Forget. This is why sometimes I got a bad rap of people calling for previews. You can't do a preview to talk about. You're inside. You don't know what it is.
I think the odd thing is for something being such a creative, personal thing that people treat it so much like a business. I want to see a preview. Or what about this dress? Can you send it over here? Like, and for you, it's really a personal event, and you're connected to each picture, each piece that you make, whether it's through your art or the ability of hands to sew the beads on. Everything is a piece of you. And I think that it's amazing how people don't respect that in a business that respects that. It's kind of odd, don't you think?
It is.
You had some nifty things in your life. You had a fabulous documentary.
Yes, David Boatman's beautiful film.
Martha Stewart's a good friend. She actually narrated the documentary, which was shown at Sundance. How did it do? I'm sure it did fabulous.
Fantastic. And they rerun it on TV every year.
It's great, isn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, it really is a pat on the back, kind of. It's the little things like that keep
And
you
I
going.
love going on Martha's show cooking, because I love to cook.
Ah,
And every time I've been on the show, we make something.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So we're going to be invited to dinner soon?
Oh, sure, I would love to cook for you.
I eat raw food.
You eat raw food? All
Yeah.
raw?
How would you manage that one? Oh,
I
now
would
I've got him thinking.
No, I would figure out how to do it.
I'll give you one of my. Actually, I'm giving you one of my books in your gift bag.
Did you do a raw cookbook?
I did several. I did 7 books, but 5 on health and nutrition. Yeah. So in 2011, you were indicted to the Fashion Group International Walk of Fame.
Yeah, that's a great honor.
2012, Andre Leontali Lifetime Achievement Award from the Savannah School of Art and Design. Right?
Yeah.
You have your gowns are featured in the the Victoria and Albert Museum, LACMA, the Costume Institute, the De Young Museum in San Francisco. Anything you're missing?
Yeah,
Anything you haven't
it would
done?
be pretentious, but I've received 47 awards from museums and institutions and doctorates in my career based on clothes. But as you said, what they're connecting is art. Like you mentioned
Yes.
the Cooper Hewitt. The Cooper Hewitt National Design Award was based on fine art application. So, there's always that fight about is fashion fine art? And I always said it's the blending, depending upon the designer, of applied science and actual art. So I'm very honored.
Applied science and actual art. Whew, that one I have to go home and think about. That's a heavy duty one. We know where your name
No, you know what? I'll give you an example.
Yes, tell me.
The applied science of the genius of Azzedine Alaïa and the art of how he conceives woman.
And you mesh it.
And Azzedine was, you knew him, didn't you?
Very well, yeah.
He fit on you.
He fit on me. It's funny because Nicole Miller is a friend of mine, and she said to me this morning, she said, it's the system of numbers as applied to art.
That's it.
Yes. It's the system of numbers applied to the art. Where do you want to go from here? What's next? You have your Ralph Rucci, or the RR331.
Carol, I want to build the made-to-order business, and I want to get myself back to Europe to show during the couture in Paris,
Oh,
so I can grow the business.
have you let them know that?
Not yet.
He wants to come back to Europe and show in France. Hello, France.
No, the Chambre Syndicale de Couture would open their arms.
Absolutely, you are exactly their muse.
I have to get myself to the space financially so I'm able to do this.
And do it right.
And do it right. Because I do not want to, let's put it this way, I'm horrified about taking money from anybody.
I was just going to say, the last thing you need are partners.
And I want to do it, and I've been doing it slowly, building the couture, and hopefully by July I could be there with a fall couture.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. Will you come?
I would absolutely
Good.
come to see that. Thank you, Ralph. It's been
Wonderful
such
being
a
here.
pleasure getting to know you better.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on our show.
Loved it. Good luck with everything.
Thank you, and you as well. I'm looking forward to coming to Paris to see your
Okay,
show.
Great.
And thank you for joining us in Carol's living room. We'll see you next time.